Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is the power of the new media to influence us. Turns out Zionism and Zionist are dirty words today. Huge tech companies like YouTube and Facebook have developed algorithms that they use to determine hate speech. When the determination is made, the entry is banned. The algorithms are needed to handle the vast amounts of material posted on these sites. Too much for humans to monitor and then to rationally decide. Instead, a computer makes the decision. Certainly, computers make the determination in the first stages of hate speech selection. Billions of elements in the system are filtered through the hate speech algorithm. The words Zionist and Zionism seem to have become trigger words. That means posting a presentation on YouTube about being a Zionist may land you, your site, or your organization in the category of banned due to hate speech. That is exactly what happened to JBS. YouTube banned JBS, a speech delivered by JBS President and CEO Mark S. Golub, and then presented on this station before being uploaded to YouTube, entitled Being a Liberal American Zionist Today, was removed from the YouTube site. The taped presentation was delivered in an established Reform temple, the Door of a Door congregation, located in the very liberal town of Little Neck, New York. The exact quote from the screenshot on YouTube after Rabbi Golub's presentation was pulled read, quote, "removed for violating YouTube's policy of hate speech," unquote. The video was down for 6 hours, from 11 to 5. JBS, as you all well know, is the Jewish Broadcasting Service, a non-profit Jewish educational network created by our own Rabbi Mark S. Golub. JBS sees itself as a PBS-style network that engages viewers with ideas about Judaism and Israel. The purpose of JBS is to advance discussion about significant issues that matter to the Jewish people and to Israel. It does so with grace, aplomb, and passion, bringing together creative and engaging Jewish minds to discuss valuable and compelling ideas. JBS is in a class of its own, a gift to thinking and caring American Jewry. I can say without any doubt that Mark Golub does not promote any form of hate. I would go so far as to say that he harbors no hate. He believes in dialogue and open discussion. Mark Golub is a traditional American liberal, raised in the tradition of civil rights and the love of baseball. He is a person who fights injustice and was deeply offended and distressed by being categorized as promoting hate. He was, as he told me, more than dumbfounded to discover that his liberal, non-hateful, actually inclusive presentation was chosen to be banned by YouTube. He was only promoting Zionism, an expression of his love for Israel. In his presentation, Golub expressed, quote, empathy for the Palestinian people, unquote, explaining that traditional Jewish values and liberal American values dictate his, quote, appreciation of the state of Israel, unquote. Rabbi Golub was deeply offended to be categorized as a perpetrator of hate. I must openly admit that while I'm stunned by YouTube's decision, I am not impartial as an observer. I'm a staunch Zionist and a defender of Israel. I have very little patience for attacks against Israel being termed merely anti-Zionist or anti-Israel, when they are, in fact, flat-out anti-Semitic. If I did not identify with and sincerely support JBS values, I would not host this program, and I would not allow myself to be a guest on Rabbi Golub's roundtable discussion shows. I can attest firsthand that he is a passionate, vocal defender of justice and of Israel. It all goes back to the algorithm. And in the end, after an onslaught of protests from devoted viewers like you, who received an emergency email from Mark Golub and a formal appeal from JBS, the YouTube piece was reinstated. The backlash against the ban and the appeal to reason prevailed because those were addressed to humans, not to a computer reliant on artificial intelligence. The damage was done, and the glitch in the YouTube's algorithm has been revealed. They never explained why the video just reappeared or informed JBS that it was back up, but we know why it happened. YouTube will not publicize their algorithm, but the notion that Zionism can be equated with hate and that the YouTube computer algorithm will continue to identify it as such is a real problem. It is anti-Semitic, it is deeply offensive, and it is wrong. And if perchance it was hateful YouTube viewers who used YouTube's report function, through which anyone can report hateful speech or something else that they think violates the user's rules and sets in motion an evaluation, it is just as wrong. It means that JBS was targeted in that case. Bottom line is this: anti-Semites have hijacked the word Zionism and turned it into something evil. The algorithm of anti-Semitism is the next gargantuan obstacle lovers of Israel now need to confront. Another battle being waged in the Middle East. The intensity keeps rising. This battle, as if they don't have enough to fight about, is over food. Yep, food. A food fight in the Middle East. A Middle East food fight. For years, Arabs have accused Israel of appropriating their food and making it Israeli. They claim that falafel is not Israeli food, it is Arab food. They claim that hummus is not Israeli, it's Arab food. The assertion is that just about any of the foods created by Israeli chefs is in fact a ripoff of Arab food. Now labana, or laban, a goat cheese yogurt, is on the proverbial chopping block. The enemies of Israel say that the Zionists should create their own culture, not expropriate it from the culture that surrounds them. They say that appropriating their foods is another example of Israeli occupation. Israelis, they say, are not only stealing Arab land and Arab culture, Israelis are stealing Arab food, or Palestinian food too. Israeli chefs and Israel's culinary creativity have become world famous. And while many of the dishes borrow from the region, to suggest that Israeli Jews stole the culture is, simply put, preposterous. These attackers want Israel to be seen by the world as interlopers, replanted into the Middle East from Europe. But in reality, most Israelis are actually descendants of Jews from Arab lands, not from Europe. Only part of Israel's culture comes from Europe. Much more of Israeli culture, including food, originates in the Arab world. Israel is not different from any other immigrant country in the world. Their food is a unique blend. It is a product of the immigrants' earlier lives, and the immigrants modify the food to accommodate to local weather, local supplies, local taste. Take a look around the culinary world. Japanese tradition is steeped in history. The rice and seaweed food that Americans call sushi is a joke in Tokyo. California rolls, baked salmon sushi, and aspiring sushi chef in Japan, an itamai, will spend up to 20 years training and apprenticeship. Here, sushi is prepared and sold in pizza shops and local delis. And chow mein? Chicken chow mein is not even a Chinese dish. It's an American creation. Australian chow mein is crispy. Mexican chow mein replaces traditional elements with local Mexican spices. Chow mein really just means stir-fried noodles. Chow means sauté, as in stir-fried, and mein in Chinese means noodles. Italian pizza from Italy is nothing like Ray's Famous or Domino's. American pizza is different. There is a multi-billion-dollar-a-year difference. On any given day in the United States, 13% of America is consuming pizza, and no proud Italian is calling it a ripoff. Several years ago, the Guinness Book of World Records recorded that the winner of the world's largest portion of hummus was in Abu Ghosh, an Arab village just outside of Jerusalem. During Israel's 1948 War of Independence, the townspeople of Abu Ghosh decided to side with Israel and fought arm in arm with Israel against their Arab neighbors. Abu Ghosh still remains an Arab town and still remains part of Israel. Because of that affiliation, they have prospered, and for the same reason, Abu Ghosh is vilified, not praised, by their hummus honor. Several years ago in New York, in honor of Israel Day Parade, I was asked to be the Guinness Book of World Records judge for the largest falafel ball in the world. It was huge, very heavy, and very official, and lots of fun. The late former DA Robert Morgenthau was the other judge for the falafel ball. These foods all originated in one place, but like immigrants, the food has traveled, sometimes across oceans, sometimes across borders, and like the immigrants, no longer the food is in the host country, the more it adapts and acculturates and assimilates. This is part of the beauty of immigration. After the creation of the State of Israel in 1948, almost all Jews of all Arab and Muslim countries were expelled. 850,000 Jews, nearly 1 million people were expelled from their homes and became refugees. About 85% of them came to Israel. The numbers are mind-boggling. Algeria, 165,000 expelled. Morocco, 240,000 expelled. Iraq, 135,000 expelled. Almost all ran for their lives. Many were murdered, rushing out in what became a mass exodus from Arab countries. They left with the shirts on their backs and with their traditions, their very rich and proud traditions, and especially their recipes and food. Israel did not steal the food of the Arab world. They did not appropriate it. Some Jewish communities dated back thousands of years, to a time way before there was Islam, to a time when the tribes were pagans and the Jews were the only monotheists in the area. The modern state of Israel is cutting edge in so many ways, but not just in biotech and computers, and in theater and in music, but also in culinary arts. World-class chefs of Israel have embraced their past traditions and created new and uniquely Israeli dishes based on their past. It's part of what makes Israel so interesting and so very Israeli. Coming up next, Points of View. Here's what some important voices have been talking about. I want to discuss two columns today, one from the New York Post and one from the New York Times. Both address the second round of the Israeli election. The lessons learned from this election are valuable for all who follow Israeli politics. It is a mistake to think of it as a news item of one day, or relevant for only a week. And that's why we are discussing them today. First up is a column by Benny Avni. He typically writes from New York City, but this time he's actually in Tel Aviv. He actually went to vote. It was published online on September 21st and in print on Sunday, September 22nd. Online, the column is entitled, Netanyahu's one-man Israeli rule likely over thanks to Bibi fatigue. In print, because it's in the Sunday paper, the headline is actually longer than it would be on the online version. It's entitled, Win or Lose, PM's iron reign is over, an era is gone, Bibi is gone. Avni, like many others, exaggerates the fact that Bibi was unable to move the needle and break the deadlock of the past election. But despite all that, he writes, Netanyahu is far from dead in the water. This is how Avni begins. Dateline Tel Aviv. Benjamin Netanyahu may yet survive his lackluster performance in Israel's election Tuesday, but the one-man rule that marked most of his time in office is likely over. Known by fans as the Wizard, for his mastery of political manipulation, the Prime Minister is fighting to remain in office and out of jail. He's already offering to share power with his main rival, former Army Chief of Staff Benny Gantz. For the first time in a decade, people here are starting to contemplate what a post-Bibi Israel would look like. Netanyahu, 69, has been at the top for 10 consecutive years and an earlier 3-year stint, having served as Prime Minister longer than anyone in the country's history. Now, even opponents who constantly highlight his failures pay homage to his unmatched skills. A master communicator, a political pro who has improved the Israeli economy by leaps and bounds, Netanyahu has also adeptly navigated Arab enmity without too much bloodletting while expanding Israel's global reach. Avni does not suggest that Bibi's tenure was bad, just long, and now his time has come. He writes, unprecedented public handshakes with Gulf emirs and quiet intelligence and resource sharing with countries from North Africa to the Arabian Peninsula became the norm even as Bibi befriended India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi and recently signed a trade deal with South Korea. Other Asian, African, and Latin American leaders flocked to Israel in impressive numbers. Netanyahu's communication skills in Hebrew and English and his mastery of television and social media helped. They've also kept him in power. Avni concludes, opining that Bibi may hold on for a few more months, but his era is over. This is how he concludes. Indeed, several leaders of Blue and White, Gantz's party, that ran on a Dump Bibi platform are former close allies. So was Avigdor Lieberman, a former Bibi confidant, who can now secure his hold on power but won't coalesce with him. Bibi fatigue is influenced by many factors, including the increasing prominence of his wife, Sarah. Sheldon Adelson, the American casino mogul and Netanyahu's top political benefactor, reportedly told Israeli police investigators recently she's completely crazy and denounced her undue influence over the Prime Minister's decisions. Police investigations into Bibi's alleged corruption will reach a crescendo on October 3rd with a crucial hearing to decide whether to indict the Prime Minister. Bibi denies any wrongdoing. Opponents now accuse Bibi of holding on to power simply because the premiership affords him immunity. True, Bibi still has many fans, and he may yet survive a few more months. But as one man told me at a Tel Aviv voting booth Tuesday, it's like a song by Netanyahu's namesake, B.B. King. The thrill is gone. The problem with Avni is this column is that he, like so many others of his colleagues, they're writing Bibi's epitaph. That's a mistake. A politician with so much skill and staying power will turn this non-victory into a winning hand. The rank and file of Likud still support Bibi Netanyahu. He won the Likud primary by 130,000 votes. This could change, but I do not see that change on the horizon. Second up is an editorial from the New York Times. It was published online on September 20th and in print on September 21st. The titles are exactly the same in both versions. It reads, "What's next for Israel?" ? The New York Times online explains that the editorial is an opinion of the editorial board and not an op-ed. The conclusion the New York Times reaches is not the conclusion Benny Avni came to. This is how they begin. Political predictions are always risky, downright dangerous in Israeli politics. With a plethora of political parties and factions in ever-shifting coalitions, an election in Israel is normally the starting gun for weeks of elaborate and unpredictable horse trading before a government emerges, or fails to. The process is barely underway since Tuesday's vote. Yet even at this early stage, some trends bear watching. The results confirm that the classic issues of Israeli elections past, how to deal with Palestinians and their lands, have faded in the absence of progress towards a negotiated peace. So instead, the focus shifted to domestic matters and to the long reign of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, known popularly as Bibi. Bibi fatigue is nothing new, given the long string of scandals around him and his wife. The Times now explains, none of that means Mr. Netanyahu is finished. A master political infighter, desperate to avoid prosecution, he will surely explore every possibility to stay in office, even if that means yet another election. Almost immediately after the vote, he offered to negotiate a government of national unity with Mr. Gantz. Now the editorial concludes by dragging out their bias and their critique of Bibi Netanyahu and of Donald Trump. That's what they do. They can't help it. Here's how they conclude. Under Mr. Netanyahu, the Israeli government has overtly sided with Mr. Trump and the Republican right wing, encouraging the president to take provocative actions like recognizing Jerusalem as the Israeli capital and the Golan Heights as Israeli territory, both in violation of long-standing American and international positions. At the same time, elements of the Democratic Party have grown increasingly suspicious of Israel, if not hostile to it. Mr. Netanyahu's exit, should it materialize, may halt this dangerous shift and provide a new Israeli government the opportunity to reclaim broad bipartisan support in the United States. The New York Times has been extremely critical of Bibi for years. Yet, they also see and understand his remarkable skills. I was not surprised to read this editorial, but I was pleased to note that they had the maturity to also see the strengths of Israel's longest-serving prime minister. Coming up, commentary through cartoons, where pictures tell the story. I want to discuss 4 cartoons today. The first is from France, and it's by Patrick Chapet. It is called Attacks on Saudi Oil Fields. The cartoon was published September 22nd. In the background, Saudi oil fields are burning as a result of the Iranian attack. In the foreground, the Saudi prince is shouting, "Those Shiites don't respect our holy sites." This is very funny. True, the Shiites don't respect Sunni holy sites. In this case, those holy sites are the Saudi oil fields. Next up is a cartoon by Bruce Plant from the Tulsa World. It was published September 19th, and it's entitled Locked and Loaded. Locked and loaded is the expression the United States President Donald Trump used in response to the Iranian attack on the Saudi oil fields. In the cartoon's first panel, the president is sitting and tweeting, "Locked and loaded." Behind him is Uncle Sam, looking very distraught. that there might be an all-out war. The next panel is a satellite that reads sanctions. And the final panel has Uncle Sam saying, whew, this is a wonderful take on the rhetoric versus actions of the Trump White House. Third up is a cartoon by David Fitzsimmons from the Arizona Star, and it's entitled Heating Up. It was published on September 17th. A couple is watching the news, and the husband gives his commentary saying, it looks like evil Iran bombed evil Saudi Arabia, who probably wants us to bomb evil Iran. Now, even though Saudi Arabia is probably more evil than Iran. His wife comments, probably right. This is, of course, a conundrum. The Saudis are our allies, not our friends. We share interests. We do not share values. Finally, Dry Bones from Yaakov Kirshen, published September 14th. It's entitled Palestinian President Abbas. Abbas is about to speak. The cartoon reads, Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas explains his position. And then Abbas says, killers of Jews are holy martyrs, and they are sacred to us, unquote. Kirshen has a gift of getting right to the core of the issue. The real question he is asking is how can Abbas, who is supposed to be the Palestinian leader, make peace with Israel when these are his opinions? In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. Iran is waiting for an American response to their attack on Saudi oil fields and refineries. The Iranian strike resulted in the collapse of Saudi oil production by 50% and reducing world oil by 5%. A combination of 30 drones and cruise missiles launched from Iran into Saudi Arabia was the cause. It was an Iranian response to the West's sanctions. Now Iran is awaiting the counter by the United States and Saudi Arabia. The verbal U.S. response was not very intimidating. Both the United States President Trump and Secretary of State Pompeo spoke strongly, but then couched their words and trimmed their anger. This tamed response will not be interpreted as a threat by Iran. Actually, the opposite. If sanctions are all that the U.S. is intending to enact against Iran, then the supreme leader will undoubtedly release another military strike. He's playing a game by pushing the envelope. That is exactly what he did by downing the U.S. drone earlier this summer. The lack of a response or limited response by simply imposing more sanctions led the supreme leader to consider and then embark on this attack on Saudi oil infrastructure. The supreme leader loves these games, and he gets a perverse pleasure out of making the U.S. squirm. He will continue to play until he is put in his place. He knows that Saudis cannot do it alone, so he is challenging the U.S. It seems that he believes United States President Trump cannot or does not have the personal strength to take the blowback from Iran and the rest of the world. The U.S. is taking the easy way out through sanctions. But know this, Iran is going to continue to push the envelope. They will once again strike at a U.S. ally. Maybe they will strike another Saudi refinery, or maybe one in the United Arab Emirates instead. Things have gotten much more complicated between the United States, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. China just entered the scene in a gargantuan way. The Chinese recently signed a $400 billion deal with Iran. It is an investment in the form of capital investment into the Iranian economy. China is doing exactly the opposite of what the United States is asking countries to do. China is providing the badly needed US dollars Iran needs in order to provide the basic necessities for their economy. Now the United States must confront China. The big question is, will they? If the United States does not confront China, it will signal to everyone else, including Iran, that the United States has no bite behind their roar. Saeed Molai, the Iranian judoka who followed his country's leader's orders and threw a match so that not to compete against an Israeli, he's then defected. The judoka has been hiding in Germany, fearing for his life since the end of that competition in Japan. He cannot contact his family in Iran for fear that they will be punished for his actions. The fly in the ointment is that he really wants to compete in the upcoming Olympics in Japan, but certainly cannot and will not compete for Iran. He's a man with no country. And there is a solution for Molai and others in similar predicaments. The International Olympic Committee has created a special team of refugees for this very purpose. But there is another problem. An athlete of the level of Molai needs to practice and needs to compete internationally. That will draw attention to him. He will not be able to stay underground for long. When I was in Germany, under a sports visa, he did not request asylum. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Did you know that Israel is actually a stable democracy? Always remember that. I'll say it again. Israel is a stable democracy. People ask me questions and refer to Israel as a banana republic all the time. Intelligent people sitting in green rooms with me when I'm about to go on air to comment on the happenings in Israel ask me how anyone makes sense of what's happening in Israel. Israeli democracy is just different from U.S. democracy, which is a republic. Stability is measured in transition of power in good time and in bad. The Israeli electoral process is very sound. In the September election, nearly 70% of eligible voters turned out to cast their ballot. That is slightly higher than the first election in April. Israelis take their politics very seriously. They care. They're involved in the conversation. Some might call it the argument about the future and their destiny. One of the reasons why they care is because there are still real threats to their very existence. Israelis do not underestimate their enemies. I would not fret. Israeli democracy is an experiment, always tinkered with and improved upon, but still extremely successful. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double high or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, P.O. Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.